Welcome to Healthcare IT Today. I'm John Lynn, together with my colleague and friend, Colin. The world of technology and healthcare are ever-changing in new and novel ways. That's why we love this stuff so much. So join us as we discuss the latest healthcare and health IT news meshed together in new ways, which help generate ideas and new perspectives. Plus, we'll have a little fun along the way. On today's episode, we'll be talking about non-traditional healthcare entrants. And today's episode is sponsored by Windstream Enterprise. You can learn more about our sponsor at windstreamenterprise.com. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at the hashtag HITSM and our personal accounts at TechGuy and at Colin_Hung. Plus, check out our 13 years of Health IT blog content at healthcareittoday.com. Hey, Colin, you ready to talk about these new non-traditional entrants?
Absolutely. And we're both recovering just, from the recent HIMSS conference. So this is perfect to talk about these new entrants. So
yeah, it's always fun to see them at the HIMSS conference. They've got some money to spend.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. So today we've got 4 very interesting topics to cover. One, we're going to talk about this whole thing that went around Twitter sphere a little bit around, should Apple buy Epic? Can they, should they, will they? So that we'll have some fun with that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about who we've got our eye on in terms of, non-traditional entrants. And then we're going to go back in time and talk about, well, with all these non-traditional entrants, what happened to that Google Health and Microsoft Healthvault? Why did they fail? And why today they might not have? And then also, lastly, we're going to conclude by just talking about companies that we wish were non-traditional entrants that we wish were coming into healthcare and why. So it should be a fun conversation today, John.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of good topics.
All right, so let's hop right into it. So, John, you responded to Jim Craemer, the guy on TV, the guy, bye, everyone knows him.
Bad money!
And Bad Money, yeah, I remember that show. It's funny he still remembers for that. Anyway, he got into a statement around, hey, Apple should really buy Epic, and it's such a great fit, and it's going to happen. And you posted an article that was sort of a response to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't think that's going to happen, and here's why. And this is the tweet that actually came back from Jim Craemer saying, actually, this was a very thoughtful counter response about why it might not happen. So dive into that a little bit for us.
Right. So Jim Craemer responded. He said, here's an incredibly thoughtful counter to our argument that Apple should buy Epic, talking about my response. And he said, no disagreement that it would be great for Apple, just some very cogent points about why it will most likely not come to pass. And I think that's actually a good assessment of what I wrote up about it. Jim appropriately argued that Apple could benefit by owning a company like an Epic, but he also, I think, later in other tweets said Cerner would be fine too, potentially, and some other ones, because then the stock market would stop just valuing Apple on how many devices they sell. And I actually agreed with him on that. Like, there's a valuable idea to say, hey, Apple needs to be evaluated on something more than iPhone sells. So that made a lot of sense. But of course, then I went on to say, well, it's not going to happen. Like, Judy is just not going to do it, right? Like, it's just not who she is. I did suggest in another tweet that, hey, maybe in a generation it might happen, right? So, everyone says, well, Judy will never sell and she put it in trust and they're legally bound. Well, it's like trust can change, right? Like, whoever owns the trust or whoever is responsible for it can say, hey, the best interest of Judy and her goals and her wishes, which was to transform healthcare, would be to sell to an Apple or whoever, right? And so they could change. I just don't see it happening at all, at least in this current term. In fact, they should have said Cerner. If he would have said Cerner, some people would have been like, maybe, right? I don't know. What do you think of it?
Well, I think his concept was right, because I agree that whether it's Apple or Google or any of these companies that are kind of dipping their toes in the water with healthcare, I think acquiring an EHR company of the size and significance of an Epic or a Cerner or an Allscripts or any of these folks is intriguing to think about. And I think it would change the way those companies are evaluated. I mean, in terms of at least they would go, oh, okay, you're doing more than just your traditional business, whether it's Google and advertising and whether it's Apple and devices. I agree with you. I think the target that Jim picked for his article was the one target that I would go, probably not likely to happen just because of the culture. I mean, that company is violently independent for a good reason. That's what they were founded on. That's their ethos. That's everything they're about. So, and to try and target that company, I think was probably not the right choice. But I like where you were going. Well, hey, if he had chosen Cerner or any of the other ones, it doesn't have to be that big, but just some of the other EHR companies out there, I think it would have made for some very interesting thought exercises. So it is definitely intriguing to think about.
Yeah, and someone said Athena Health, but with all the selling to the private equity and stuff, that doesn't make sense, for sure. And yeah, I mean, the reality is, I think he misread Judy as well. She just doesn't have that prideful need to like sell for some reason, for her own ego. That's not who she is, at least from what I've seen. And so I think it was a misread on that part. But the thing that annoyed me most about this whole discussion was so many people were like, yeah, Apple, do it. And it was almost with this intense idea like, oh, if Apple buys Epic, then the Apple goodness will just somehow like rub off on Epic and it will somehow become a beautiful interface that I love, like my iPhone. And I'm like, that's just ridiculous to think about. Like that, oh, if Apple buys them, somehow that magic sauce will just rub off on them in some magical way. Like, has that ever happened in an acquisition, especially of that size? No. And it misreads healthcare too. So that annoys me when people say that.
I'm sure that's a wishful thought. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would love that to happen, but I agree. I don't think it's realistic. And I think, the market's realistic. And I think Apple and the people who are running these mega companies, they're very smart. They know that they can't just go out and do this now because they're not ready yet. I mean, I think they're they're hiring the right people. They're bringing on the right talent to help them figure out this whole healthcare thing. And I think that's the smarter way to do it rather than jumping in and just acquiring a company and then trying to figure out what to do with it afterwards.
Yeah, and by the way, GE tried to acquire Epic, and they were supposed to have a conversation, and Judy's like, "Why? What do we?" She's like, "That conversation ended because it wasn't a conversation."
Exactly.
It's not gonna happen.
Exactly. Let's move on to the second question, John. So, what non-traditional company non-traditional healthcare company do we have our eyes on? So, who already is sort of coming from into the space that you're interested in looking at and finding out more about?
So I actually don't like Apple. I'm kind of a downer on Apple as far as their disruption of healthcare. I think they're trying to sell more devices, not disrupt healthcare. So the two, and I actually think Google will disrupt healthcare, but not health IT. So I didn't want to choose them. I think some of their Verily life sciences stuff is interesting, but it's more of med device side of things rather than health IT. So on the health IT side of things, I'm looking at Microsoft first, which I think with their Azure cloud is pretty interesting, and what they're able to do with that, the way they're able to offer different AI engines on Azure cloud is pretty interesting. The also secret one that everyone always forgets about is Skype. Skype telemedicine or Skype business. There's some fascinating options there with Microsoft being able to be successful on that. And then the second one that I think has already made a pretty big play in this, so it's a pretty layup prediction. But that's Salesforce. I think they're just quietly impacting healthcare in a way, and especially as we drive to a more patient-driven, consumer-driven culture in healthcare, I think Salesforce is going to play a much bigger role, and will have a huge impact on that, and being able to customize the relationship with the patient.
Interesting. I mean, I totally can see that. I mean, as a Microsoft fan, I applaud. I'm really rooting for that company to kind of make it a go this time, as opposed to what happened with Healthvault, which we'll talk about in a second.
It's amazing you can say Microsoft fan. Like, I think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, no one would admit that publicly.
Yes, I love my PC. What can I say? I'm addicted to it. No, but the two companies I've got my eye on, one, again, is a little bit of a layup like you. I'm really looking at Amazon and seeing what they're doing. And I'm looking at Amazon not just only from the healthcare impact that they could have with, their acquisition of Whole Foods and with their acquisition of PillPack, but also just in terms of the cloud, like the IT capability, the computing power that they are able to offer health IT and being HIPAA compliant and all those things. That is going to be amazing to watch over the next few years. I also think that they're uniquely positioned to really make an impact in population health. I mean, they pretty much know what we buy on a regular basis. They're able to fulfill those almost instantaneously. The impact that they could have on a pop health initiative or on any of these social determinants of health is just phenomenal. And I think they're going to go that route. And so I'm keeping my eye on
You
Amazon.
just scared a lot of patients too, right?
It's so true, but at the same time, imagine the impact they could have. They can just know, hey, like, listen, given your health, you may not want to have this in your basket. Why don't you choose this? These are some suggestions, right? Like, you can totally see that as being something that they would offer and be able to do if they had that kind of a partnership. So,
Yeah, the other two pieces with Amazon is Alexa. With
yep,
now the Alexa has video, so you could do telemedicine or other things. And then I think the other one is supply chain. Supply
absolutely.
chain can be an interesting position too.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, they've definitely got lots of arms in other spaces and everything. So, and the other company I'm interested in, again, a little bit of a layup, Walmart. I am very intrigued with all the experimentation that Walmart is doing. Now, they've tried a bunch of things and then they've kind of abandoned a few things too. So I look at that and it's going, they're trying to figure out the right formula. And I like them for two sides. One is obviously on the retail health side. I think they're doing some really cool things. But on the other side is just they're a massive employer. And I'm watching them from an entry of how are they going to approach being a healthcare provider themselves. They're sort of kind of bypassing a lot of the traditional healthcare in a lot of cases and going, you know what, we'll just hire these people and go direct because it is a much better way to provide healthcare to our employees. So I'm very interested in keeping my eye on Walmart, which is, again, not a
Yeah,
traditional healthcare entrant.
they got plenty of cash.
They got plenty of cash. They got plenty of cash. So if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Healthcare IT Today with John Lynn and Colin Hung. Today's episode is sponsored by Windstream Enterprise, a Fortune 500 company that helps organizations ensure that their technology infrastructure has the capacity, flexibility, and security needed to support their critical applications. They have a healthcare division that is taking all of the best practices that they've learned from retail, manufacturing, and banking and adopting it to the healthcare space. They are a company that can provide the foundation for the technology that powers your patient experience initiatives.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things I've learned is that IT DevOps and really that infrastructure piece that Windstream does is one of the needs of healthcare organizations. It's underappreciated by so many. So I'm glad that companies like Windstream are focusing on it and providing those services. So if you're interested in that type of infrastructure to power your patient experience initiatives, check out more info on Windstream Enterprises at windstreamenterprise.com.
Awesome. And we're right back into it, John. So our third topic, let's go back in time a little bit, dial it back and go, why did Google Health and Microsoft Healthvault fail if now we look at those and go, it's totally makes sense for those non-traditional entrants to come into healthcare? Why did these two fail?
So I make people angry when I say this, but I mean, I just see it over and over that the patients don't care. Like Google and Microsoft both thought, oh, the patients would care. They want to get their info, and that somehow magically, if they had access to this info, that they would be healthier. And this it is true in a very chronic condition. Yeah, they do care, and they go after it, and so there is a small slice of the population where that's not true. But unfortunately, even many with chronic conditions are in denial, and so or they just don't go and do the work, or they don't want to go to the work, or they're not healthy enough to do the work of getting the data. And then, the rest of us that feel healthy, whether we are or not, are just, we pay lip service to caring about our health, but we actually don't really care. Our actions say otherwise.
Interesting. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I look at it as the failure to me was a misread on the market. And I misread in two ways. You mentioned the patient side. I think they misread that. But to me, they misread that was a business sustainable market. I mean, for me, I look at the patient market and go, no one wants to pay for anything. I mean, you have some people who are really into, managing their chronic condition. They will pay. But that, as you said, is such a small slice of the population that these two technologies were not sustainable at those numbers. And so I think they misread the market to say, hey, well, this is something that everyone wants, everything needs. It's true, everyone needs it, but there's only a small percentage of the population that will actually pay for it. And I think they misread the market. I think the other thing they totally misread was the difficulty in actually getting that data, whatever it was, into that system. They totally, totally misread the interoperability challenges within healthcare. I don't think they really sat down and really truly understood that, oh, in order to build a comprehensive patient record, or a record that actually makes a difference to a patient, I would need to connect up to 7 to 10 different systems from different providers, get permission and legal to actually go and do this. Or I'm asking the patients to actually manually key it in or manually scan it in. And that just was not an experience that people wanted.
Yeah, no, by the way, it's an order of magnitude more complex than, say, financial data that you try to do in mint.com, right? I mean, that's what they were trying to be, was the mint.com for health information. And yeah, that quote is actually from Mario Highland at Interop Guy on Twitter. He told me one time, he said, the complexity of the health data is an order of magnitude more complex than, say, financial data. And that is much harder to do. And so, I agree completely. They totally misread how easy it would be to get the data. In fact, during that time, most of it was on paper. It wasn't even in an EMR,
Exactly.
right? So it was on paper, let alone we got to process it and turn it into something actionable. It wasn't clear that they knew what they were going to do with it. So I think those were all really important lessons learned.
Yeah, and I think, I think it would be fair to say now, looking back on it, they were ahead of their time in the sense of, it was a great concept, but just the culture of the industry, the knowledge of patients, the availability of the devices that we have now just wasn't there when they first started. Like when they first started, Fitbit and those folks, they didn't have a lot of data that could be generated from those types of devices. But now you look at it and go, the wealth of information and data that's available through the devices that people are able to buy, that needs to be housed somewhere. So now all of a sudden there is a little bit more of a need to go, well, hey, I've got all this stuff. I can put it here in Fitbit. I can put it here in Nike. I'd really like to put it all together because I've also got this sleep machine that's tracking my sleep. I've got this other thing over here. So now there is a little bit more impetus for someone like myself or a patient to want to collect all this data into one spot and then make it available. And I think that is now slowly changing too. We talked about it even a year ago, how physicians and people aren't even looking at this data. And I think that's slowly changing. So I think now reintroducing this concept would actually have a little bit more stickiness than it did back then.
Well, and it's who's going to pay for it, right? I saw the CNBC reporter tweeted, all these companies that start wanting to focus on the patient and provider are now focused on the payer and the employer because that's who actually pays for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the other thing I was going to say. Like they misread the business model. Some patients will pay for stuff, but not a lot of them, because the expectation is either their employer will pay for it under their insurance plans or the payer will pay for it. And it's just part of a package to keep them healthy. And actually, that's kind of got some truth to it. They are the most, employers and payers are the, other than the patient, are the two other parties that have the money that are most incented to keep that patient out of the hospital. And so I think a lot of money is now going into prevention programs and pop health programs and wellness programs. So I think, the time, if they had introduced it now, probably would have gotten a little bit more traction. But you're absolutely right. I think they totally misread the market at the time, and they went at it in a totally wrong way, which is sort of try to go through that patient end.
That's why your Walmart prediction's a good one, is they're such a big employer and they care about, because they're spending a lot of money on it. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to that a little bit, that's why I'm also kind of interested in looking at companies like the GMs of the world, the Boeings of the world, these mega employers who have thousands and thousands of employees. I mean, they're going to enter the healthcare game. They know they're already in it, whether they like it or not. So very interesting to see how those things will pan out. So let's get to our final question, John. We're going to spend a little bit of time on here, but what companies do we want to see that are non-traditional enter into healthcare that may not actually be in here yet?
All right, so I'll go first with that. I think we both have a fun one and a kind of more traditional one. So how about we do our traditional one and then we'll do the fun one. So I'd say, and it's not even a traditional healthcare player, but one that might make sense to me is Home Depot. Especially with the IoT, we're starting to buy our refrigerator there. We're starting to buy all our appliances. It's just a matter of time. We're trying to wire up our home to monitor our health. I could see a whole health section of Home Depot or some sort of branding coming from Home Depot saying, hey, monitor your health at home. And that would be a powerful thing for them to start, creating new ways to get them into their stores by saying, hey, create a health center in your home that monitors your health. I think that would be fascinating.
Well, and there's a lot of devices that are coming online now that are now, at the price point where you could have it at Home Depot. These detectors that you can put on your wall for fall detection, for voice control, for the case of emergencies. All these things, right now are sold only in specialty stores. If someone like a Home Depot were to create this sort of market, I think you would definitely see people, being able to go, okay, I can go to Home Depot to go get this kind of stuff. I mean, I like it. I like it, John. It's a good choice.
But I'm a Home Depot guy.
There you go. There you go. Well, along that line, my choice, more traditional choice as you call it, is IKEA, for very much the same reason. In terms of, IKEA is well known for being an efficient, very low priced sort of, furniture for the every man and every woman. And I think, given that more and more people want to age in place, they want to take care of their parents to keep them at home. I look at it and go, there's a golden opportunity, the puns intended, for IKEA to get into this sort of space around home care. So to sell the beds that are made at the right height, to have the railings that go up and down, to have those things that are available for the washrooms, right? And to make furniture that is really just ideal for someone to go, you know what, you're getting older, here's some of the things that you're going to need, right? I think there's an opportunity for someone like IKEA to bring that to the masses. Because again, right now, a lot of these things are sold by specialty vendors. They're very expensive. Healthcare payers are having to pay for some of this, and they're very expensive. So I think someone like IKEA getting this space would make it go, hey, here you go. It's flat packed. You just put this together. It's now perfect for you. I'm hoping that IKEA will come into the healthcare space.
Yeah, my only problem there is I actually went to try to find an office chair there, and I checked every single chair they had, and they were all totally uncomfortable and not ergonomic. So I don't know if cheap and ergonomic and healthy go together, but if they could match those together, then yeah, I think it makes sense. So what's your fun one?
So my fun one is Hasbro, the toy company. Literally a fun choice. And the reason why I picked Hasbro,
have all the toys behind you, so this seems appropriate.
I do a lot of that.
As you're talking.
Yeah, I'm not a shareholder, just for the disclosure.
Just an investor in toys.
Exactly. I just invest in their products. No, but the reason why I bring up Hasbro as an interesting thought is really around health literacy and healthcare education, wellness education. Hasbro actually has a long line and a long history in educational toys, not just the G.I. Joes and the Transformers of the world, but they produce a lot of things that could really help toddlers really start to learn at an early age things around wellness, right? You think about a lot of the toys they make, they're like home kitchens. They make things like, toys that really talk about, that talk back to toddlers and interact with toddlers. So why not introduce an element of wellness into that, or maybe collaborate with some payers and employers to go, hey, here's a great way to sort of educate that next generation around wellness and all the great things so that when they arrive at the time when they start needing healthcare, they're much more educated. They're used to getting information from trusted sources. That to me is a huge opportunity for someone like a Hasbro to kind of introduce this subtly into the toys they already make. I'm not saying they have a special line. I'm just saying just introduce it into the toys they already make. I think there's a wonderful opportunity. I would love to see them do that.
No, that's a good one. Mine's actually somewhat along those same lines, and for me, it's Disney. I don't know if, to me, there's so many opportunities, and I've seen a little bit of flavor of Disney. I went to a clinic that was designed with the front of house and back of house, which is some Disney concepts, right, of keeping the two separate and flow and things like that. But for me, it would be more, what are the kind of health tracking experiences, health education experiences that could happen at a Disney park? Could you actually improve your health while participating in a Disney park? I think there's some interesting opportunities there, especially if they did that kind of health conscious mind, around the experience and really creating these memorable experiences that promote health. I think there's some potential there. There's just something magic about the word Disney that is just so powerful. I mean, we all hear it and we all get some different emotions, and and somehow we open up our wallets and spend a ton of money. So like there's some magic there that if they applied it to healthcare in some interesting ways, it would be fun to see what they could accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting choice. I mean, definitely, we've all heard about, what happens if Disney ran your hospital. And I know the focus has traditionally been on the the service side of things, which is a large part where the Disney magic occurs. But in recent years, you're right, there's a lot of technology that Disney has brought to the market, like the RFID tracking and the tracking of in the wristbands, the ability to pay just by using those wristbands and things. So there's some interesting things that Disney could do now from a technology standpoint that could definitely be used in healthcare. I mean, they've even got the whole thing where you can track down lost kids, right, with those wristbands. Imagine that for the senior market. I mean, that same technology needs to exist, and I'm sure people would love to have the Disney themed wristbands as opposed to the ones that are available today, which are a bit clunky. But anyway,
of course, on the media side, you could have Luke Skywalker doing a lightsaber fight, and I just hit 10,000 steps. 10,000 whacks.
Well, and actually, I was going to mention that, but you think about like that Pixar movie, right? Like that dove really into the psychology around emotion and so forth. And I know that wasn't meant to be like a health wellness thing, but a lot of people use those concepts in a way to kind of go, hey, here's a really great way to explain to kids and to explain to even adults how complex our minds really are and emotions really are. It was just a wonderful. They have definitely an opportunity to make huge impacts in healthcare.
The power of media.
There you go. That is the power of media. And with that, John, we are out of time for another episode. Whew, these things always go by so fast.
Guess we got to go to an hour.
There you go. There you go.
No, I don't think so.
But thanks of all of you who tuned into this episode of Healthcare IT Today. We really appreciate you. You can find out more details about our show by checking out the programs page on healthcarenowradio.com. And share your voice and engage with the community at healthcareittoday.com, which is our website, and on Twitter using the hashtag HITSM. I'm Colin Hung with my friend and health IT collaborator John Lynn. Until next time, have a great week.